I'm Dr. Burger, and welcome to this presentation for Research Foundations in Language Education, PDL4805. In this presentation, we are going to focus on referencing. Now, how do you use referencing in your research? Supervisors would like to see evidence of the sources that you used during the development of your research study, and these must be presented in a manner that is consistent and recognized with the recognized referencing techniques. At UNISA, the adapted Harvard reference technique is preferred. So what is the difference between a reference list and a bibliography? A reference list contains all the sources that you have used in your study and cited in the text. A bibliography is a list of sources that you have read and not necessarily cited in your text. In a proposal or a research study, you will use a reference list. So always make sure that all the sources you cited in text are included in your reference list. So let's have a look at how to cite in text. This is where you show where you got your information from. For example, you will say Adam, Hussein, and Agim, and then in brackets, the date and the page number. Now the date, the names and the date will then be consistent with what is in your reference list. So the author's names are typed and then in brackets the date of the publication and the page number. When you cite one author, you will have the name and in brackets the date and the page number. And you can either say according to Ndlovu, or you can say when doing assessment Ndlovu, and then you include it in the brackets as well. When you cite more than one author, you will have them in a list. When there are three, you'll have a comma after the first one, and Whisker and Trafford with their date and page number in brackets, or you will have all the information in brackets. Note, however, that you will only use the ampersand when you have the names in brackets. So when it's not in brackets, you will say Whisker, Blackheath, Whisker, and Trafford. But when it is in brackets, you will not say and, you will use the ampersand. When you are citing a source with multiple authors, you will, when you cite them the first time, you will put all their names. However, in subsequent uses, you will say Morris et al. So you don't have to repeat all the names in the subsequent citing. When you cite the secondary source, where you say found the source Wilson in a source authored by Austin, then you will say Wilson, the date as cited in Austin. So this one can be a bit tricky. So always check whether you are citing it in the correct way. However, it's also important to note that it is advisable to use a primary source. So rather than look for Wilson and find the primary source. So this is an example of citations in text. So you can read this in your own time, but you will see that it flows nicely and that you cite all the sources in the text, the date and the page numbers. So let's have a look at your reference list. And this, again, you can go through this carefully on your own time. But when it's one author, the name, the initials, the date, and then the book name in italics. And when there are two authors, there's a comma and an ampersand between the two authors, and the book name in italics and the publisher. And if you have used a chapter in a book written by someone else, other than the editor, you will then indicate that it is by Byrne and it's in Brown's book again, and you will indicate that it's the editor. Again, I advise you to go through this very carefully and make sure that you look at examples when you compile your reference list. When you use internet sources, you put the authors, the name of the document, and the URL where you would find it, and it's important that you then put in brackets the date that you accessed this resource. When it's a journal, the name of the article is stated in a normal font. However, the name of the journal is then in italics. So this is the difference between you and your reference list when you have the journals and the book. Well, if it's a book, the title of the book is in italics, and here the title of the journal is in italics. And this is an example of a reference list. So it's always alphabetic, obviously, but it is listed with all the information. And you will see, as you are going to be dealing with journals and books, I advise you to look at the reference list, how the references are appearing. Let's have a look at where you find the references. So you can use Google Scholar to find sources. So you looked up Gumbo, you found his article in the journal called Perspectives in Education. If you then click on the Cite tab, it will show you how to cite this resource. You will see that it's MLA, APA, Chicago, Harvard, Vancouver. So as we say, we prefer APA or Harvard, generally Harvard, and then you can simply copy and paste that information onto your reference list. However, still check whether it is exactly in the same correct format that you are required to use. Even if it says Harvard, still check that it's the correct one. So this is just a nice shortcut to find out how you cite someone. This one is also nice. Some articles, if you find them, on the cover, it gives you all the information, and which is on the left-hand side. That is an example of a cover. And then you use that information to compile the reference. So you have the author's names, the date, the name of the article, and then the name of the journal in italics, and the journal edition and the page number. And all of that you find on this cover. So it's volume 2, number 2. So it is then cited as 2 and in brackets 2 and the page number where you found it. Some journal articles will show you how to cite the article. If you look on the left-hand side, it's highlighted in yellow. This is also from a cover of an article. They will then show you how to cite it, which is always helpful. But again, make sure that it is according to the style that you are supposed to use. For example, the adapted Harvard style. Tip that I want to give you about using Google Scholar, you may want to look up somebody. For example, in this case, you look up Manike and the article on postgraduate supervision. And then you will find different articles by Manike. And if you then link your Google Scholar page, it gives you an option to compile a library list, and it also gives you an option to link it with the UNISA library. Then you can get access to articles in a very easy way. So if you look at the first one, it's available. This is on the right-hand side. It's available as a PDF and through the UNISA library, which is very, very nice. But the second one is not available as a PDF. It's only available through the UNISA library. So if you click on that, it will take you to the UNISA library page where you will log in. The third one is not available via the UNISA library, but it's available on a PDF. So my advice is that you look for those, that you link your Google page to your UNISA library, because it will allow you access to a lot more articles. And then I advise you strongly to use the UNISA library. It is a rich resource, and if you consult it and you look for the e-reserves or the e-journals, even the, as I've indicated to you before, the institutional repository where you can read other studies, you will find that it will make your literature search so much easier. So now that you are gathering resources and you are making lists and finding articles, it's very important that you then store them in a place where you can find them again, because you will find that you will read something and you will not remember where you found it. So manage your resources, and you must be meticulous about your referencing. Therefore, you have to be methodical and organized. So start now. Find a system that works for you. How do you, in the first place, find your resources, and how do you store and keep them so that you can find them again? If you save a document, always save it according to the date, the name of the author, and then the title, so that you can find it very, very easily. There are reference management software that you can download, and these are just for examples: Mendeley, Zotero, EndNote, and RefWorks. And you will see that some of them are linked to the Google site, where you can, if you then get an article from Google Scholar, that it will immediately go into whatever your reference management software is. So it is like your own little library where you can create folders, you can organize your resources there. And the one big example is that when you then start typing in Word, for example, I know that with Mendeley and Zotero, EndWork and RefWorks, and then the two programs speak to one another. So when you type in, you can program your Word then so that when you type in Manike, that it brings in the reference for you, and it also builds your reference list automatically. So start experimenting with that. It can make your life a whole lot easier, because it is critical that you manage your references well in your research, because it will seriously undermine your study if you do not reference properly. So that is the end of this presentation. And remember that research is a formalized curiosity. So don't let the difficulty that we may sometimes have of finding and citing your resources, don't let that hamper your enthusiasm about your study. That is why I encourage you to make sure that you are organized and that you find yourself a system that will work. Thank you.